If you walked onto a small farm in the 1930s or 40s, before chemical fertilizer became a household name, you would notice something unusual. The soil was dark, loose and alive. It held moisture in drought. It drained in heavy rain. Crops grew thick and steady without constant feeding. Farmers did not talk about feeding plants. They talked about building soil. And once that soil was built properly, it could remain productive for decades with very little outside input. That kind of soil did not need weekly applications of nitrogen or phosphorus. It renewed itself. It repaired itself. It resisted erosion and disease. Many old farmers called it lazy ground. Not because it was neglected, but because it did most of the work on its own. Today, most people have never seen soil like this in person. And that raises an uncomfortable question. If farmers once knew how to create soil that stayed fertile for 50 years, why did we abandon the method? How a one-time investment in soil replaced a lifetime of buying fertilizer. Before World War II, most farms operated on closed systems. Manure from animals went back to the fields. Crop residues were returned to the ground. Cover crops were planted after harvest. Kitchen scraps were composted. Nothing valuable was thrown away. Over time, this constant recycling built, massive reserves of organic matter underground. That organic matter became the engine of fertility. It fed microbes, the microbes fed plants, the plants fed people and livestock. And well, the cycle just continued. A farmer might spend, 5 to 10 years building this system. He would haul manure, grow green manure crops like clover and vetch, compost straw and leaves, and plough these materials into the soil. It was hard work at first, but once the foundation was laid, the land could produce heavily for decades with minimal input. This is why many farms from the early 1900s remained productive well into the 1970s, even after the original owners retired. The soil itself had become a long-term asset. Living soil works so much better than just chemical feeding. Healthy soil, it's not just dirt, it's a living ecosystem. In 1 teaspoon of fertile ground, there are actually more microorganisms than there are people on Earth. Bacteria, for instance, fix nitrogen from the air. Fungi, they transport minerals to the roots. Protozoa, they help regulate populations. And earthworms, they aerate and mix the soil. When this system is intact, plants are never truly hungry. Nutrients are released slowly, right when the roots need them. Water, it's stored in these tiny microscopic pores, and, you see, diseases are suppressed naturally. Chemical fertilizer, on the other hand, it just bypasses this whole system. It feeds the plant directly, but, it starves the soil. Over time, microbial populations collapse. Organic matter simply burns away. The ground becomes compacted and, it ends up dependent on constant feeding. The so-called lazy soil system really worked because it put biology first and nutrients second. That's the thing. By focusing on the living part of the soil, everything else just kind of fell into place. So, how did wartime agriculture manage to preserve these methods, even under all that pressure? Well, during World War II, fertilizer factories were actually converted to make explosives instead. That meant farmers suddenly lost access to synthetic nutrients. But interestingly enough, food production actually increased during this time. In quite a few places, soil quality actually improved during the war, simply because people were, forced to go back to biological methods. Fields were left to rest under clover, gardens were mulched thickly, and compost piles started to grow behind nearly every house. The soil was doing the work. So, why did industrial farming push this system aside? Well, after the war, chemical companies needed new markets. Fertilizer was cheap, it was fast, and honestly, it was heavily promoted. Farmers were told they no longer needed livestock, compost, or rotations. They could simply apply nutrients from a bag. This was, pretty appealing. It saved labour, it simplified management, and at first yields did increase. But the long-term cost, that was invisible. Organic matter declined, soils hardened, and input requirements just rose every year. Farmers became customers instead of stewards. By the 1970s, most agricultural land had lost more than half its original organic content. The so-called lazy soil system disappeared not because it failed, but because it was no longer profitable for suppliers. So, here's the thing. You can actually rebuild self-fertilizing soil today. Recreating this system is still possible, even on a backyard scale. The process really follows the same principles used a century ago. So, you want to start by feeding the ground, not the plant. Apply thick layers of compost, aged manure, shredded leaves, and grass clippings. Aim for, about 2 to 4 inches each season. Plant nitrogen-fixing cover crops whenever beds are empty. Crimson clover, peas and vetch work well, Let them grow until flowering, then cut and leave the roots in place. Keep soil covered year-round. Mulch prevents erosion, moderates temperature and feeds microbes as it decomposes, which is quite important, really. Right? So avoid deep tillage. You see, disturbing soil destroys those vital fungal networks beneath the surface. Instead, use shallow cultivation or broad forking. That's much better for the soil. Recycle everything organic, honestly. Coffee grounds, vegetable scraps, paper towels, eggshells and garden trimmings, all of these belong in the compost, not the bin. After, say, 3 to 5 years of this practice, most gardeners notice dramatic changes. Water retention improves, weeds decline, fertilizer becomes unnecessary, and, plants grow steadily instead of in bursts. So, why does this forgotten system matter in these uncertain times, you might wonder? Well, self-fertilizing soil is honestly more than just a gardening technique. It's, in fact, a form of independence. When supply chains fail, when prices go up, when products simply vanish from the shelves, living soil just keeps on working. It doesn't rely on trucks, factories or markets at all. It really just depends on care and patience. And this, truly, is why past generations invested in it. They understood, perhaps better than we do now, that land was security. We forgot because, well, convenience replaced responsibility. Why reviving this knowledge is worth the effort. The so-called lazy soil system is not magic. It's actually the result of disciplined recycling, biological awareness, and long-term thinking. It does, you know, require effort at the beginning and a fair bit of restraint afterward. But once established, it pays dividends for decades. If you begin building it today, you may well be feeding your family, your children, and even your grandchildren from the very same ground. That is the legacy earlier farmers left behind, and it is one we can reclaim. If you found this guide valuable, do subscribe to the channel for more forgotten history, practical survival knowledge, and old-world skills that still work today. Go on and share this video with someone who believes in doing things the right way, not just the easy way.